I am here with Amy, and Amy has a story to tell us. So, this is Amanda with Texas Education 911, and we're bringing you breaking news. So, Amy, please tell us what happened. Tell us when and where and the location. We just want to give you the floor, and thanks so much for stepping up and being brave enough to share your story.
Absolutely. I am in Canyon, Texas. Our district is Canyon ISD. And our story really could go back to our son's freshman year of high school. He's a bright kid with just a great work ethic. He's a freshman in college now, but he was just not challenged in high school. Academically, his high school was very lame. They were constantly left to play on their phones in certain classes or were just watching movies. We started counting the number of days one teacher had them watching movies in class. And I'm talking about regular, dumb, crass Hollywood movies. And it was about 30% of the time. His junior year, his math teacher quit with like 3 months left in the year, and they didn't replace him. So that really crippled him in math. And then also just the usual fallout from the culture rot and our district's attempts at social engineering, pushing their mental health agenda and SEL stuff. So I asked him to describe high school in one word, and he said degrading. So things got really bad in the spring semester of his senior year. We were so just really worried. So we started looking into how to homeschool him. And Canyon ISD uses software called Skyward to track grades and progress. So we tried to figure out exactly what he lacked to graduate. Well, our son said, just use the graduation status portal. The problem was when we logged in as his parents, we didn't get access to that portal. Only the student did. We didn't even see it. So that was a big red flag for us. Why is this information being given to the students but not the parents? So we logged in with his login and saw that the information in the graduation portal was wrong. It said he still needed to take classes that he had taken the previous year or 2 years before. So it was just a mess. And at that point, we asked to meet with his counselor. And as soon as we sat down with her, she said basically, oh, hey, oops, you already met all the graduation requirements in December. It turned out a dual credit speech class he had taken also satisfied his one remaining English requirement. And they've offered this class since 2014, so she should have known that. So, in all of the planning meetings, course selection meetings, she never realized or never told him that he was already finished. So, we were left wondering, is this incompetence or dishonesty? I mean, how can you tell? So, that began our grievance adventure. And really, we were lucky to know that there was a grievance process. We still meet parents that don't even know there is one. Every district has one. So, in our level one meeting, the district representatives we met with, this would have been one of the assistant superintendents and the director of secondary school leadership. These gentlemen acted completely surprised and just mystified, couldn't explain why these things had happened or even what they would do to make sure it didn't happen to another student, which was really at that point the big concern of ours. The horse had already left the barn as far as our son was concerned, but we wanted to know if their system was broken or just being ignored or what. Anyway, the whole level one meeting was just really unsatisfying, no real answers, gaslighting. It was gaslighting. So we went to level two, and that meeting was with a different assistant superintendent, and that meeting was just pointless and weird. She talked about how her daughters loved our high school and they were really involved and had all these great friends, and she was sure they wouldn't want to leave early, air quotes early, because really it would have been right on time. Like there was something wrong with our son for not wanting to stay beyond what was required, like he'd done high school wrong or something. She tried to make the case that he should stay in school because he was on one of their athletic teams. Like, gee, we know the prisoner has served his term, but he really seems to enjoy the prison gym. So let's just not say anything, just completely tone deaf.
Yeah.
And then when she saw she wasn't going to talk us into making him stay, she got really deep and asked us, what is high school? like this heavy philosophical question, what is high school? I mean, how do you answer that? I guess she was trying to trap us into saying it was 4 years. I don't know, but we left that meeting like, what the heck just happened in there? And it needs to be said that during the grievance process, for anyone contemplating it, that a district is going to go out of its way to try to frustrate you. So, for example, our district makes you physically go to the administration building to get the grievance form. And then you have to wait for the right employee to come up and have you sign her form that says you received the grievance form. So, since we went to level 3, we had to go up there 3 times and do their little drill. And these forms should be on their website. This is purely an intimidation tactic.
Oh,
Another thing was that our son was 18 at the time we started the grievance process, so a legal adult. Right before the level 2 meeting, someone called us and told us that he had to be there at the level 2 meeting because they had very strict policies about that. And she said, we can't even give you his transcript without his permission. And I said, that's funny because his presence wasn't required at the level 1 meeting, and they gave us a copy of his transcript. So I told her that our son was working full time now and he was not going to be there. He had lost enough time to Canyon ISD, but she kept insisting that he had to be there. But the FNG policy, the district's grievance policy, clearly allows for him to appoint us as his representative simply by writing a letter appointing us as his representative. So she seemed to have no knowledge of that. So again, intentional or incompetent, hard to know. Oh, and a few weeks later, I was able to pick up his diploma, his official transcript, and his shot record from the district with no questions asked other than what's your student's name, which was just sort of a head scratcher. Anyway, so much for their very strict policies. So in our grievance, we asked questions that were very straightforward, and in return, we were given these very lengthy non-answers and just like weasel words. So, for example, we asked what procedures they had in place for notifying kids about their graduation status, and asked if they had followed these procedures in our son's case. So we got pages and pages of student handbook stuff, and we're told that yes, these are the procedures and they were in place, which doesn't answer the question, did you follow them? And we got that one multiple times throughout the process. These procedures were in place, and that's great, but of course it turns out they didn't follow them. And
right.
they also played this game of, well, your son didn't declare an intent to graduate early, so that's on him, which completely, and they hid his graduation status from him. So how is he supposed to declare he wants to graduate early? It wasn't even on the radar because he didn't think he could. And we wouldn't have been able to figure it out anyway, since the information they were giving us was wrong. That would mean we knew more than his counselor apparently did. So they did this over and over again, just refusing to make these distinctions. So we get the response to our level 2 grievance, which is a long list of the procedures that were in place. And we saw that they were supposed to have gotten our signature when he was in 9th grade on something called a personal graduation plan. And this didn't sound familiar at all. So I asked for a copy of it, which they could never produce because we never signed anything, never even saw the form. We weren't informed of the meeting where all of this was supposed to have happened. So we started probing a little deeper, and it turns out that the personal graduation plan isn't just district policy, it's also in the Texas Education Code. In fact, a lot of what is in the student handbook is actually law. They don't tell you that, like it's not footnoted or anything, but it is. The law in our case is TEC section 28.02121, which says that they had to get our signature on this graduation plan. And they're also supposed to update us if any change is made to that plan, and they never did that either. So now in the level 3 hearing, we were able to say y'all violated the law, and the assistant superintendent had to acknowledge to the board that this was true. One trustee, bless her, had the presence of mind to ask if they had violated this only in our son's case or if they had fumbled it for the entire class. And she admitted that they had failed to do it for the entire class of 2022. And later in the meeting, it became obvious that they've never followed this law. So then the assistant superintendent told the board that she didn't believe students should be told that they fulfilled the graduation requirements early, which we find completely shocking and really just immoral. Here we had an 18-year-old young man who was miserable at their school, going crazy with boredom, who could have gotten a full-time job or started college or literally done anything else with his life that he wanted to. She told the board that telling kids they were free to go could cause stress for the student. I mean, this is just completely arrogant. She basically sat there and said, "We know better than the families what's best for these kids, and it should be our call."
Wow.
Yeah. As one of the remedies in our grievance, we asked for a written apology from the district to our son for wasting his time those 9 weeks instead of graduating him. We taught him when he screws up to own it and apologize and make it right. So it was important to us that he see his leaders doing the same. Instead, he got a handwritten note from the assistant superintendent, and she basically said, "Your parents said you feel like we wasted your time. I don't think we did, though. Sorry you feel that way. You make me sad." It was in no way an apology. We never got one. And, I told the school board in dollars how much he could have earned in those 9 weeks at his job, which was $4,800, which is a big deal for a kid saving for college.
Absolutely.
Just to illustrate, there were consequences for what they did. And one trustee was like, "We can't give you money." I mean, I wasn't asking for it. I was making
Making a point.
a point, but it
Right.
seemed to go right over their heads. And they made money off him every day he was enrolled. They would have made somewhere in the neighborhood of $3,000 for having him enrolled that whole semester. So hiding his status cost him money and made them money. And I suspect that was the real motivation. So at that point, we're thinking, these people, I mean, are they incompetent? They just flat out don't care. Either way, somebody needs to answer for this and be held accountable. So we started looking into how to pursue things with TEA. So in trying to gather evidence, I asked for a recording of the level 3 hearing, which they're supposed to make by law. I got an email from the superintendent saying that because we asked for a closed meeting, they can't record it, which is just a flat lie. He told me that they had elected to do a certified agenda instead, which is an actual option for them, but he couldn't give that to me because he'd be breaking the law, even though I was in the room. So I had their admission, but I couldn't prove it. And the certified agenda they had was an absolute joke. It didn't meet any of the requirements of a certified agenda. It was called Board President's Hearing Guide, and it had stuff like, today is July 11th and the time is fill in the blank PM, and it wasn't filled in. It had statements that addressed Mr. and Mrs. fill in the blank. And my husband wasn't even there at the hearing because he was sick. So it was prepared ahead of time. It was not a representation of any testimony at all. So we have no record of that hearing. So now this is significant. There was one trustee absent from that meeting, the level 3 hearing. So she had no firsthand knowledge of any of the testimony, and she had no record to go by. Yet it was she, a few days later, who made the motion to uphold our level 2 decision and voted to uphold it. Now, what information would she have used to form her opinion? She wasn't there, and there was no record. So hearsay. So I asked her those questions, and she did call me a few days ago. Nothing's ever in writing with these people. You have to record every conversation. And she said it was her understanding that no new information can be added to a grievance after level 1. So she was just going by that record. So she missed the assistant superintendent admitting to violating the education code. She missed all of my testimony about what had transpired since level 1. And she still felt justified in upholding our level 2 decision. So I don't know. She must think the grievance process is really odd having 3 levels like that because, I mean, one's enough, right?
Right.
So, yeah, it just really illustrates how some of our board members just rubber stamp whatever the district hands them. I don't understand why these trustees take what the district tells them and just roll with it. They're supposed to be holding them accountable.
Right.
But I don't think they know who are the foxes and who are the hens. So anyway, I filed a complaint with the TEA, and it's still pending all these months later, 7 months later. We also began the process to appeal the board's decision. And in that, you get to represent yourself before a judge and against a paid attorney, paid with your money, who can do this stuff in her sleep because she knows she's going to win. And so, to make a long TEA appeal story short, our appeal was thrown out because they claimed TEA had no jurisdiction, which makes no sense to me at all. How does the TEA not have jurisdiction over a district violating Texas education law? I'm waiting for someone to please explain that to me. They also ruled that our case was moot because our son had already graduated. And this is something everybody needs to understand. You start out looking for justice, for a wrong to be righted, for someone to be held accountable, something punitive to happen, but that is not how any of this works. The TEA seems to only serve to ensure that the district corrects the thing they did wrong. So the only remedy they could offer in our case would be to get our signature on our son's personal graduation plan, which was the thing they didn't do in the first place. And of course, that makes no sense because he's done. He's graduated already. It's like the TEA is saying, gee, it's too bad they stole your lunch money, but you don't eat lunch there anymore. So there's really nothing we can do. And the commissioner didn't have anything to say about the board not keeping a record because it didn't have any bearing on our case because it was already moot. So none of the district's failings and violations matters. Absolute kangaroo court. So in the end, the district and the board can violate any rule or law they want, pretty much knowing that nothing is going to happen to them. And in our son's case, Canyon ISD violated state education law, state administrative law, their own made-up rules, FERPA, Open Meetings Act, and so far they are unscathed, and we got nothing for our time and trouble, not even the simple apology letter. And I think it's the arrogance we encountered all along the way that is the most galling thing about the whole experience. To have the TEA judge hear me testify that our son lost $5,000 in wages because of the district's dealings, that he could have spent that semester in college actually accomplishing something, and then turn around and say to us that we didn't suffer any actual harm. That's just incredible. He referred to our loss as our family having to make a change of plans. Our jaws just literally dropped. But absolute arrogance from the district, arrogance from the board, arrogance from the TEA. And it was sad for our son to see that his leaders live by a different standard than the rest of us, even though they know they caused him actual measurable harm. But that's reality, I guess.
They're not caring about your rights as a parent or about what's best for your child. It was all about their interest.
That's right. And the supposed remedies that they offer are just nothing but getting you to chase your own tail.
Right. Well, Texas Education 911 volunteers are working with lawmakers to try to help them understand this type of situation and what needs to change in the schools. So, what would you say to your lawmakers in the state of Texas?
I would say that they represent me, not the other way around. And all of these elected officials need to be held accountable for the laws that they're supposed to be subject to, instead of these laws being positively toothless and having no effect in reality.
Right. So this is exactly why Texas Ed 911 legislative priorities are so important. So we want to help create a parent ombudsman for education. It's something that we need. It's something that the parents who support this group need to be able to file a complaint directly to the state with one phone call, and a mandatory investigation would be required and would be launched. And then from an outside source. So you're not only having the jurisdiction of the biased school district that is trying to cover their tail. So clearly, school doesn't understand or respect the fundamental rights of parents to direct the upbringing of their children. So Texas 911 is advocating for changes to the Texas Constitution and the Texas Education Code. Right now, the schools are protected by sovereign immunity, and so they have no fear of being sued. And it's almost like they can just do what's safe for them and disregard what's best for the child, disregard what it costs the parent, like they did in your situation. So,
absolutely. Yes.
Yeah. But thank you so much for coming forward and sharing your story. There are so many stories, even just in your school district and in others throughout Texas. We're really hoping that this can make an impact and that I'm sure there are hundreds of other parents that needed to hear this, needed to know that there's a grievance process and the districts are required to follow this. And they need to post those forms. They need to make people aware of the process. Thanks again for coming forward. Do you have anything in closing that you'd like to say?
Oh, you're just so welcome, and we all need to share our stories. We learn from each other, and I just think that's so important. So thanks for going down our grievance rabbit hole with me tonight.
I appreciate it. I'm appalled and astounded, but also so grateful that you stepped out and the example that you are to your son, that he can see that this is what it means to stand up, and to fight for things that are right. And so I applaud you as a parent, and you're an example to me. My kids aren't in high school yet, but one day they will be, and I have a shining example of what it means to stand up for them.
Well,
So thank you so much.
that means a lot. Thank you. Thanks for all the work you're doing.
Absolutely.